On Tuesday, February 15th, Council Member Gennaro, chair of the Environmental Protection Committee of the New York City Council, joined Queens local leaders and environmental advocates in a press conference outside the Queensbridge Houses in Astoria, calling on the New York State Public Service Commission to approve 2 renewable energy projects designed to provide emissions-free power to New York City that would lessen the dependence on power plants in western Queens that burn fossil fuel.
What we're doing in City Hall with the gas ban bill and all of the other legislation we're doing depends upon a clean grid. So if we're going to take away the ability of people to burn fossil fuels on a distributed basis throughout the city, that is going to put more stress on areas around power plants. So if we don't green the grid and the demand for electricity gets more as we move more and more away from fossil fuels and towards electricity, that is going to mean that these areas which have been epicenters of environmental injustice for generations, will only get worse.
Since 1963, Western Queens residents, including those in the Queensbridge public houses who live nearby the power plants, have been bearing the burden of power, as 55% of New York City's fossil fuel power is generated from their neighborhoods. Zip codes 11101, 11102 and 11106 have seen asthma rates and admissions to the hospital with respiratory illness higher than the entire borough average of Queens. The 2 proposed projects, Clean Path New York and the Champlain Hudson Power Express, were selected by the governor from a list of 7 submitted to the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. However, they must be first approved by the Public Service Commission, comprised by 7 commissioners who will be casting their vote sometime in March of this year.
Councilman Gennaro, what a great pleasure. We had you on AKTINA FM, now on AKTINA TV. Tell us a little bit about this commission that is about to take a vote about changing the grid.
Well, it's very, very important that New York City green its grid. That's the grid from which we get our power is now mostly powered by dirty fossil fuels. It's critically important that we change that to green energy so we won't have all the pollution problems we have, particularly right here, which is now called Asthma Alley. It should be Green Alley. Plus, the city is taking a lot of measures to move away from fossil fuels in buildings and to rely more on power from electricity. And so if that power is not green electricity, it's going to be dirty electricity, and it's going to make areas like this even worse, because right now people are burning fossil fuels in their homes, and as we move away from that and put more reliance on the grid and on the power plants, the areas around the power plants are going to get worse, because these are going to have to produce more electricity. So everything that we're doing in the city and in the state to move towards green power really hinges on what the Public Service Commission is going to do. The state has declared an emergency. They did this Tier 4 process by which they were going to select one big statewide projects, and because of the urgency of the situation, they selected 2 projects. And so they only did this because we are in an emergency situation. This is something that the Public Service Commission has to realize and has to see that the cost of this is really more human cost than it is, dollar and cents cost.
Tell me a little bit about the bill that you recently passed and any other bills that you're working on.
Well, as I mentioned during the press conference, we talked about what we call the gas ban bill, and that would create a situation whereby new construction, starting in 2 years, you cannot have fossil fuel as part of the mix. And so buildings are going to be going all electric. And so that is critically important that we do that. That's part of the previous administration's plan. It's part of the current plan of this administration. It's part of the governor's plan that we do this. and the reason why I'm here today is because that bill going to all electric is going to make these areas worse if we don't make the grid green. And in other things we have going on in the committee, we're very concerned about all of the storm events that are flooding all of New York City, people's basements backing up. We're going to be making sure that every building that wants one would be able to have a city finance backflow prevention device so that they will not have their basement full of sewage, and doing everything we can to expand the sewer system to make sure that it can better accommodate these violent storms that are happening with much more frequency.
And talking about violence, I need to ask you about what is the City Council about crime in New York. Crime in New York has risen. Crime in Astoria has risen. Crime has risen everywhere in New York City. People are scared, are very afraid. Are you doing anything?
I am so glad that you asked this question. I support the mayor's plan, his blueprint, 100% in terms of making a cleaner, in making a safer city. If we're not the safest city that we can possibly be, doesn't even matter if we're the greenest city. I mean, that is really job one. And what the mayor is calling for, and which the governor is resisting, is for New York State to have the power that all 49 other states have and the federal government has, which is to remand a defendant based on that defendant's inherent dangerousness. Even states around the country that have bail reform laws still have that ability to give judges discretion to remand people who are inherently dangerous. Now, once someone has been remanded, that person gets an immediate appeal to another judge to make sure that the second judge agrees with the first judge. It's a fair system. Every state in the union has it, but us. The federal government has it. We don't. We need that. That's what the mayor's plan is all about. It's really not about bail. It's about the ability to keep people off the streets who are inherently dangerous, and they have to have two judges sign off on that. And we want what the rest of the country has, and we deserve no less.
Thank you. Any closing remarks?
I'm very grateful to be here, to talk to you on behalf of this public safety issue, which I think is critically important, that we judges have the ability to remand dangerous defendants, and to do my job as the chair of the Committee on Environmental Protection to advocate for the clean power and the green power that New York City residents need and deserve.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Former Council Member Costa Constantinides, who organized the press conference, stressed that the approval is not certain, as the commissioners can decide that the projects don't make sense and vote them down, or they could only approve one and not the other. Constantinides, who has served as chair of the Environmental Protection Committee during his tenure in the New York City Council, also pointed out that lobbyists, primarily from the oil and gas industries, are working to oppose them. Some will try to make the argument, he said, that the projects are too costly and will raise people's electricity bills. Constantinides argued, however, that the renewable power is not only cleaner, but it will reduce the volatility of electricity bills that are dependent on the gas markets. The time for action is now, and we can no longer wait to clean our grid, he further stressed, adding that for too long, fossil fuel burning power plants have polluted our neighborhood, making our families sicker, increasing our asthma rates.
Costa, another cold day, but I think productive day.
I hope so, Elena. Good to see you. Look, we're fighting to make sure we can bring clean energy into our community, right? I mean, as we think about the future here in Western Queens, we need power.
Right.
We want it to be clean power. We don't want it to be power that's constantly polluting our neighborhood, getting in our lungs and causing asthma. We have a chance to do that with these two new projects coming online. And all we have to do is say yes.
Right.
And the state's already approved it. All we need is the Public Service Commission to follow the advice that NYSERDA has given them and to do it.
Let's talk briefly about these two projects and how important they are.
We need, every day, New York City uses between 8,000 to 11,500 megawatts of power. So 2,500, these two projects have the potential to bring about over 2,500 megawatts.
Wow.
So you're talking, about a fourth maybe a fifth of the city's power, depending on the day. I mean, that is a big deal. And for us to walk away from that is a frightening prospect when we desperately need, renewable power. So, I just don't see, I see an emergency. I see a solution to help us move in the direction we want to go. And it's time just to say yes.
Right, right. And previous speakers, especially people who live in these buildings here, the Queensbridge North houses, they're all suffering with asthma because of the pollution across the street.
Yeah, look, I mean, today we did the framing differently. Usually we have the camera turned in the other direction. It's really about the residents. It's about people who have suffered for generations. Since 1963, we've had power plants in this community burning fossil fuels. And the cost of that has been asthma in our young people's and all of our families' lungs.
Yes.
It's time for a change. And if we're going to build renewable power and build a renewable future, it starts with making hard choices. It starts with saying yes to projects that are going to achieve our goals. These two projects can provide us with over 2,500 megawatts of power. We need the Public Service Commission to say yes, and we're hoping that they're going to do the right thing.
Okay. And how people can contribute in this decision making?
Well, I mean, they can write a letter to the Public Service Commission, and they can say that we want renewable power. And last thing I'll say is that we saw our Con Edison bill go crazy.
Oh my God.
Part of that was because of volatility in the gas market. So renewable energy is constant, right? The power of Hydro-Quebec, they turn the water, it's hydropower, right? It's a dam. They turn the water on, they turn the water off, but it's no volatility in that market. So we're not, we need stable prices, which means a power source that is not dependent on gas and its volatility.
It's just like the solar in the summer. I mean, whoever has solar, they have seen the decrease in prices. You pay just the minimum.
Yeah. So
the only thing in the winter, okay, you have to depend
a little bit more.
Yeah.
But this is a chance to kind of take us off the gas merry-go-round, and we should take it.
Right. Well, thank you, Costa. Anything else you're working on?
Oh, we're just building, doing big things at the Boys and Girls Club. We're
ready for the new building now, right?
New building. We're about a year away from construction. We're going to have some big announcements soon on some new partners in the building. We're going to always appreciate AKTINA and you, Elena, for coming out, especially on this cold day. And
Okay.
Stay warm, stay healthy, everyone, and hope to see you all soon.
Thank you.
As it was stressed during the press conference, the approval of the two projects is crucial as they have the potential of bringing over 2,500 megawatts of renewable energy to Queens, replacing the demand for fossil fuel plants and moving the city towards meeting its goals of 70% clean energy grid by 2030 and a 100% clean energy grid by 2040, as required by the New York State Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. Project Clean Path New York will transmit solar and wind energy from central New York to the Rainy substation in Long Island City, while the Champlain-Hudson Power Express project will send hydropower 339 miles along a transmission line from the U.S.-Canadian border to the Astoria Energy Complex. Thomas J. Gretsch, President and CEO of the Queens Chamber of Commerce, voiced his full support for the approval of the two projects, noting that, quote, out of the 62 counties in New York, we want Queens to be the most green county.
Glad to stand here.
All community leaders and environmental advocates who addressed the press conference stressed the importance of taking the right steps to reduce the city's dependency on fossil fuels, noting that the approval of the two projects that would replace the nearby power plants is imperative, as they will help improve the air quality and the way of life in their neighborhoods. Bishop Mitchell Taylor, CEO of Urban Upbound in Long Island City, an outspoken advocate for the removal of power plants near public housing areas in Astoria, appealed for the approval of the two renewable energy projects, as he also outlined the devastating effects the power plants have on the residents of Western Queens.
This power plant and others has supplied 45% of the power to Manhattan Island, but 100% of the pollution to Queensbridge. And we're standing in front of a building right here on the corner of 40th Avenue and Vernon Boulevard, where a young man, 19 years of age, his name was Victor, never smoked, but he suffered from asthma. He lived right on the 3rd floor. When the peakers are fired up and the emissions go into the stacks and the wind blows in this direction in the summer, those carbons are pushed into the buildings through the windows, and residents are forced to breathe that unclean air. Unfortunately, Victor has died. And I'm here to let you know there are hundreds and thousands of other Victors that are victims of this bad situation that is being generated by these peaker plants. And I'm here to call for the Public Service Commission, for all of those commissioners that are deciding on the future of people living in public housing. Don't think about the cost, think about humanity.